In an episode of Reality Check on the News Nation channel, Ross Coulthart interviewed Beatriz Villarroel, an astronomer for the Nordic Institute for Theoretical Physics in Stockholm. She is also involved with the ExoProbe project, which searches for possible extraterrestrial probes in the solar system. They discussed her recent paper showing possible proof of constructed technology or technosignatures. The dates of these observations were made is significant in connection with other important events which occur in or around this time. On the 27th of July 1952, the telescope at Mount Palomar did a sky survey, taking 2 photographs of 50 minutes exposure each, separated by 30 minutes. Dr. Villarroel, 73 years later, found things twinkling, moving and catching the light on the first picture, but much fewer on the second. Quite a large number of them seemed to be forming alignments. She also noticed that because they were point sources rather than streaks, they would have to be in a fairly low geostationary orbit, and she was very surprised that most of them were absent from areas within the Earth's shadow. This didn't mean they weren't there, of course, but there was no sunlight to illuminate them. This seemed to show that they are not distant objects. This can't be repeated today because there is so much hardware in orbit now, but in 1952 there were no human-made objects in space. The first of them, the Russian Sputnik, was not launched till 5 years later. She's written a paper, Aligned Multiple Transient Event in First Palomar Sky Survey, but is awaiting peer reviews. Then she realised that the date the pictures were taken had another significance. It was one of the key dates in the UFO flap that has become known as the Washington flyover. There were thousands of witnesses, including military pilots and other particularly reliable people. Wikipedia reports this for the night of July the 26th. At 8:15 p.m. on Saturday, July 26, 1952, a pilot and stewardess on a National Airlines flight into Washington observed some lights above their plane. Within minutes, both radar centers at National Airport and the radar at Andrews Air Force Base were tracking more unknown objects. USAF Master Sergeant Charles E. Cummings visually observed the objects at Andrews. He later said these lights didn't have the characteristics of shooting stars. There were no trails. They travelled faster than any shooting star I've ever seen. The radar center was detecting unknown objects in every sector. At times the objects travelled slowly, at other times they reversed direction and moved across the radar scope at speeds calculated at up to 7,000 miles per hour. At 11:30 p.m, 2 US Air Force F-94 Starfire jet fighters from Newcastle Air Force Base in Delaware arrived over Washington. Captain John McHugo, the flight leader, was vectored towards the radar blips, but saw nothing despite repeated attempts. However, his wingman, Lieutenant William Patterson, did see 4 white glows that chased them. He told investigators that I tried to make contact with the bogies below 1,000 feet and that I was at my maximum speed, but I ceased chasing them because I saw no chance of overtaking them. 2 more F-94s from Newcastle Air Force Base were scrambled during the night. One pilot saw nothing unusual, the other pilot saw a white light which vanished when he moved towards it. Civilian aircraft also reported glowing objects that corresponded to radar blips seen by Andrews radar operators. As on July the 20th, the sightings and unknown radar returns ended at sunrise. Dr. Villarroel also noticed that the observatory photographs were taken when nuclear bomb tests were being undertaken. The United States conducted a series of nuclear weapons tests, known as Operation Tumbler Snapper, in the early 1952 at the Nevada test site. The first British atomic bomb test, Operation Hurricane, took place in October 1952 in Australia. The first successful full-scale test of a thermonuclear weapon, Operation Ivy Mike, was conducted by the US on November the 1st, 1952. However, there was another coincidence that was not mentioned in the video. On the 20th of November 1952, 20 days after the thermonuclear explosion, contact claimant George Adamski and several friends were in the California desert near the town of Desert Center, California, when they purportedly saw a large submarine-shaped object hovering in the sky. Believing that the ship was looking for him, Adamski is said to have left his friends and to have headed away from the main road. Shortly afterwards, according to Adamski's accounts, a scout ship made of a type of translucent metal landed close to him, and its pilot disembarked and sought him out. He seemed to imply they were worried about the nuclear explosions. Adamski's home was on the slopes of Mount Palomar, so he was probably nearby when the pictures were taken. On July the 16th, 1952, the first daylight photograph of UFOs was taken by Coast Guard seaman and naval photographer Shel Alpert at Salem, Massachusetts. It's still regarded as unidentified. Wikipedia also reports that there was also an encounter in Britain, which was confirmed by radar. On the 21st of October 1952 in the afternoon, Flight Lieutenant, later Air Commodore Michael Swiney, and Lieutenant David Crofts, a Royal Navy pilot, took off from RAF Little Rissington in a Gloucester Meteor on a training flight. At 12,000 feet, they came through a layer of cloud to witness 3 white saucer-shaped objects, which they reported to be at 35,000 feet. Initially, the pilots had believed the saucer-shaped objects to be 3 parachutes. The pilots noticed the shape of the saucers was perfectly circular, and their Meteor aircraft climbed to 35,000 feet. The radar reports were from ATCC Gloucester, who confirmed that 3 objects the pilots had seen. 2 Meteor F-8 aircraft of RAF Fighter Command were scrambled to intercept the objects. They were heading east at 600 knots. The fighter aircraft did not make contact with the objects.